Hello guys, welcome to my channel Lucid Fanfic, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. Izuku's day could not be going any worse. First, he was beaten up at the start of his day, before he even entered the school grounds by his childhood friend Kaken. Then he enters the school and is ruthlessly called names that break down his psyche. And once he gets into his classroom and sits down, he already has some red spider lilies on his desk from his classmates, and he gets the unheard message. As he stares at the lilies, he hears the voices in his mind from his peers and childhood friend talking to him about his life. Weak, quirkless reject, powerless freak, die. We don't need quirkless here. Why can't you just leave me be? Deku. That one last word that bothers his mind, Deku. It was the literal bane of his existence, as it was given to him by his childhood friend at a very young age. It was at the age of 4 that Izuku had learned the lesson that not many learn until they are either heroes or in high school. Not all men are created equal. But that was my first and last setback, until it all came crashing down. An older Izuku said, as we find him walking to school. He had been late again since his bullies had beaten him as soon as he left the safety of his home, and he was now as sad as can be. His home was his literal safe haven. If they came there to beat him up, what stops them from entering his home and beating him there? His mother. She would find out immediately and call the police about it. But even then, they don't do anything about it. She really hated it when she was ignored all because she birthed a child without a quirk. Izuku couldn't understand why most people had wanted him dead, all just because he never had a quirk. Most of the time, he was treated as if he never existed, and he liked it that way mostly. But today was just not his day. Finally making it to school after finding a villain fight and the debut of a new pro-heroine MT lady, he had been writing his notes about her ever since, and it pissed his childhood friend off about it. But before he could voice his hatred about Izuku's, mumbling, the teacher enters the room with a stack of papers. All right, class, we all know that you are all excited about today. Now, we really need to talk to you about your future career choices. The teacher said, as he looked around the now groaning class. But I know you all want to be heroes. The teacher called out, laughing and having thrown the papers around the room. At this, the entire class had erupted in laughter and cheers as Izuku merely focused on his notebook as he wanted to finish his notes on the new heroine MT lady. Don't lump me in with these losers. A brash and cocky voice called out. Hey, back off Katsuki. One of the students called out. Shut it, losers. I'm going to become the #1 hero, and I will become the richest, most famous, as well as the best hero out there. Katsuki boasts. Katsuki was an ash blonde-haired boy who stood at a height of 5 feet 9 inches as he was wearing a sneer on his face. With his face was a somewhat neutral angered look as his eyes were the color of rubies that did make his face much more intimidating. Ah, you go to UA, aren't you, Bakugo? The teacher asked smugly. What? But isn't the yearly chance only about 0.02% for people to get in? That's right, losers. I aced all the mock tests as well as passed all mock exams. I'm a shoe-in for the heroics course. Katsuki smugly and cockily shouted from the top of his desk. I see Midoriya wants to enter UA as well. Isn't that right? The teacher said, lazily looking at the boy. But as soon as the looks of everyone looking at Izuku looked at him, they all broke out in laughter. Seriously? That is what he wishes to be. I thought he kicked the bucket recently. Guess he really is a cockroach. I never thought he'd try to get in there. He'll probably bribe them to let him in. The students all called out. DKU? Bakugo screams. You're worse than these rejects. At least they'll be capable of being the sidekick of some D-lister hero. But you are below these rejects? You aren't even human compared to us. Bakugo said, lowly. They took down the quirkless rule Kaken. I still have a chance. Izuku trembled. Katsuki had none of it, though, as he punched Izuku in the face, sending him to the ground. As Katsuki punched the boy in the face repeatedly, he added some explosions to his body to make Izuku more incapable of fighting back. Because as soon as he stood up, Izuku had unfortunately accidentally kicked Katsuki's feet out from under him, causing said boy to fall and smash his face into the ground. Midoriya, how dare you hurt another classmate of yours? The teacher roars. What? Are you serious? Izuku squeaked back. Have something to say, Deku? The teacher asked angrily. It was just an accident. I swear. Izuku said, completely scared. That's it, for talking back to me as well as your classmate. You are having detention as well as being suspended for a month. The teacher called out. Izuku looked at the teacher in shock. He didn't even do anything wrong. But even Kaken had looked in shock at what the teacher was doing. As he was about to say something, Izuku was called to the principal's office. Can Deku, Midoriya, please come to the principal's office, please? The principal's voice called out. As Izuku gathered his belongings and left the room, he looked at Katsuki as the young man swiped his thumb over his throat that signified a beating to come. Izuku walked towards the principal's office as he was nervously rubbing his fingers on his uniform as he was unaware of what was going to happen. He kept his eyes on his surroundings, though, in order to make sure he could defend himself. He had taken a training on his own a little bit, so he could fight back somewhat, but never got more than that. So when he entered the room, he was surprised by the appearance of a member of the higher-ups of UA Academy was sitting in the room. Ah, Midoriya is here. Please have a seat, young man, the principal said, sneering. As Izuku sat down, the higher-up for UA Academy had looked at Izuku, showing his application to enter their school. This paper has been rejected on the accounts that you are quirkless, and we don't need anyone who is of your status of being a quirkless human in our ranks. So please take this to heart and never think to come back to our established school again. The man said, leaving Izuku with his eyes becoming misty. I heard about what happened in your class, Midoriya, and I have to say that I am thoroughly disappointed. I honestly thought that you wouldn't attack your fellow classmate, but color me surprised when you did. I have no other option other than to expel you from our fine establishment. The principal said, smirking. What? What are you talking about? I never meant to attack him. It was all just an accident. Izuku tried to defend his action. I don't care for someone who isn't even a human compared to us. For all I care, you could become a villain, and nothing would happen to our thoughts about you. You are below those who don't have usable quirks. You aren't even human. I want you out of our school by the end of the day, and that is final. The principal said, kicking Izuku out of his office. Izuku couldn't even believe his eyes. His own school had finally gotten him kicked out of there, and now stopped his chances of getting into the school of his dreams. As he was walking out of the school grounds with his head lowered, Katsuki walked up with his goons. Hey, DKU! Katsuki yelled, catching up with him. What do you want, Kaken? Izuku asked monotonously. You're still getting that beating from Bakugo for what you did earlier. Longfinger said, I don't have time for this today. Can you just hurry this up? I need to get home. Izuku said, a little miffed. Your funeral, pal. The other bullies said, as all three led Izuku to an alleyway and beat him to high hell. Izuku was fighting back as he tried to defend himself, but it was too much for him to handle as he was blasted from the back, pierced from the front by long fingers, before lifted into the sky a few feet and slammed down to the ground, knocking the air out of him. All before Katsuki blasted him with his quirk, sending Izuku smacking the back of his head against a brick wall, drawing vital fluid. Meanwhile, deep within the soul of Izuku, HRM, what the hell is going on? A deep draconic voice asked gruffly. He looked around his surroundings as he found himself in a new host. His name was Draig, the heavenly dragon of domination, and he was surprised that his host had awakened him this early. He wasn't supposed to be awoken until they were at least 17 years of age. So imagine his surprise when he looks through the eyes of his host, only to find him at the end of a beatdown as he is lying on the ground with a broken femur, as well as a couple broken ribs. What the hell is going on? Why is my host this weak? Why was he getting beaten by those with weird powers? Draig called out from within the soul. Taking a deeper look into his new host's memories to get a feel for this host, he really wanted one who wasn't as perverted as his previous one. That was a real nightmare, as they were all about melons, and he was called the Epee Dragon, as well as the Shirshurudii, or Trash Dragon Emperor. So when he looked over his new host's life as well as memories, he found it to be rather tame, until he got to the age of 4. That is when everything went to absolute downhill, and he wasn't happy with how his host was treated during this time frame. Not to mention how his host started to train his body before completely disregarding it for the increase to his mind. It wasn't a bad idea to increase your mind's power, but it was in the supernatural, so he really needed to get his new host to get stronger. But the more he looked over his host's life, as well as how his host was treated, he really hated how humanity treated others that didn't have a quirk or had useless ones. I can't believe that my new host is more of a pacifist than a fighter, but will fight to protect others. Not only that he has bottled up so much rage and anger that he doesn't even get angry anymore. It is only a matter of time before he snaps, and it will be a glorious moment if it is against the White One. Albion will rue the day he angers my host. I will see to it that he is strong enough to mollywop Albion's new host. Drake said, laughing maniacally. Izuku managed to finally get up off the ground as he walked over to where his home supposedly was. He didn't realize it, but he was hearing someone laughing in his head, and it was at first concerning, but he thought it was his inner thoughts trying to get him to commit to the idea that was given to him before Kaken left. A few minutes earlier. That is what you get for attacking me in class, Deku. Katsuki said. HRNG. Izuku grunted as he turned to his back against the wall. He watched as Katsuki walked over to him and placed his hand on Izuku's shoulder. Don't enter UA, otherwise this will happen, Katsuki said as he blasted Izuku's shoulder with his quirk. As Izuku grunted in pain as the blast broke his shoulder, he stared at Katsuki with an expression that showed that the young man in front of him won. I can't go to UA anymore, Izuku said quietly. What was that? Katsuki asked, genuinely confused. They rejected my offer, even though they took away the rule of people like me taking their tests. They rejected me for something I couldn't even control, Izuku said without stuttering. From the look on his face, he was done with life and just wanted his day to end, so Katsuki, being the kind friend that he was, gave Izuku some advice. Well, since you can't go there, how about you do everyone a favor and jump off the roof and pray you get a quirk in your next life. At least then you might get a quirk. Katsuki called out laughing as he left Izuku against the wall. Present. Izuku was walking under an underpass when he heard the manhole behind him blast up and smack him in the back. As he turned around to see who arrived, he was met with the face of the sludge villain that was in the area. It was green in color as he stared at the area around him before settling on Izuku. I can't believe that he is here. Hey kid, I need to borrow your body. It'll take about 45 seconds without any pain. I promise you, the sludge villain called out. As the sludge villain came onto Izuku, he wrapped the boy before he could even scream out for help when the villain tried to place himself inside his body. Stop struggling, brat. I need your body. You'll be my hero if you can do this for me, the sludge villain called out. But before he could continue with his mockery, the manhole that the sludge villain came out of was blasted off again, hitting Izuku in the head this time, knocking him out. But before he passed out, he heard the familiar voice of the number one hero. Worry not, young man, for I am here, the voice called out, before Izuku felt wind pressure slam into him as he fully lost consciousness. Izuku woke up to a light smacking on his cheek as he saw the hero of his ideals in front of him. All Might, Izuku screeched. Hello, young man. I'm sorry for getting you into my hero busyness. I normally never do this, the hero said, smiling. I need to get your autograph, Izuku muttered, before pulling out his book, only to find it was already signed. Thanks for the help, young man, but I have to go, All Might called out before jumping away. I couldn't be back to my full power. All Might thought to himself, only to find out Izuku was hanging on his left leg. Jesus, I know all my fans are diehards, but this is a bit excessive. I would appreciate it if you got OFF, All Might called out, trying to push Izuku off of him. I really just need to ask you a question, All Might. Also, if I let go, I'll die, Izuku called out as wind pushed his eyes and mouth apart. All right, geez. Just close your mouth and eyes, All Might called out as he changed trajectory to land on a nearby building. But as he was nearing the building, he felt some vital fluid seep out of his mouth. Oh no. All Might cursed as Izuku looked at him in worry. Landing on the rooftop, Izuku fell to the ground with him holding his chest as he gasped from his near-death experience. Never doing that again, Izuku said, I apologize, young man, but I need to leave. The door should be unlocked. All Might said, moving to jump away. Please wait. Can you just answer my one question? Izuku asked, trying to gain the hero's attention. Heroes don't have a lot of time. Hurry up with it then. All Might called out, a little impatient. Is it possible for me to become a hero like you, while also being quirkless? Izuku asked, looking away from the hero with some shyness. Quirkless? All Might asked, concerned. Ever since I was a boy, I had watched you grow to becoming the #1 hero of Japan. And since then, I had been inspired to become a hero like you. But ever since I was announced quirkless, everyone teased me as well as bullied me for not being like them. And nobody ever believed in me, in the fact that if I had just tried, I could become one with hard work. So, can I become a hero without a quirk? Can I become a hero like you? Izuku asked, only to be met with All Might not being so almighty and more of small might. What? Who are you? And what did you do to All Might? Izuku shouted. I can assure you that I am All Might. The emaciated man said, coughing up, something that had Izuku give the man some water as well as a handkerchief. Thank you, young man, but in terms of your question, no, I should think not. In terms of heroism, I would feel guilty with sending you out to fight a villain that one of our other heroes couldn't fight. Not only that, but it would be my fault if I sent you out to become a hero and find out you died. It would eat at me for the rest of my life. I would like to protect you from making this decision on your own, so I would like you to not talk about my current form. All Might said, looking at the boy's now dull green orbs for eyes. Okay, what happened to make you like this? Izuku asked. 5 years ago, I fought a villain and he hit me with an attack that caused this to me. Half of my respiratory system was destroyed with it taking half my stomach as well. All Might said, showing his scar. 5 years ago, was that with the fight against Toxic Chainsaw? Izuku asked. Him? He would never be capable of hitting me. He only got those hits in because he was lucky. All Might said, before continuing. But no, it wasn't him. It was someone else. Someone that I made sure wasn't revealed to the public. If they found out that I could be touched, the world would be chaos right now. All Might said as Izuku looked down. All Might walked over to Izuku as he held the bottle, holding the villain in his hands. It's all right to dream, young man, but please, for the sake of your family, find a new dream to place yourself in and make sure that you can live your life happily. Being a hero is not all it's cracked up to be. I should know this from the amount of time I spent on the job. It isn't pretty. I wish you luck, young man. All Might said, leaving Izuku on the rooftop. Izuku looked around as he noticed that he was really alone on the rooftop. He couldn't fault the man for breaking his dreams like he did. He was only watching out for him. But Izuku couldn't help but not like him as much anymore. I need to remove some of my All Might merchandise. I need to take his words to heart. I'll never become a hero. Izuku said, now openly crying. Is it wrong to dream? At least give me a lie, so I know that some kind of false pretense of a dream could still live within me. Izuku cried as he moved towards the door. Walking down the stairs, Izuku walked around the area only to find that his best friend was walking around the area and set his eyes on Izuku. Not want to talk to the boy, Izuku started to run off before he was stopped by a local hero. What's wrong, young man? The hero asked. I just want to head home. Izuku said, trying to leave the area. What are you doing, Deku? Katsuki called out, running towards them. The hero looked at the boy with a weird look as Katsuki looked at the hero before speaking. He's quirkless, and he's my responsibility. I will take care of this. He's going to become a future villain after all. Katsuki said. Young man, what is he talking about? The hero asked Izuku. What? I wouldn't ever become a villain. I was just walking home to avoid him. Izuku said, pointing at Katsuki. Well, I need proof of him being a villain, young man. The hero asked Katsuki as he told the hero about Izuku's notebooks. And as this was happening, Izuku snuck away in order to get out of there before things could get worse. Arriving home, he needed to get his mother to have them all leave the town and go somewhere else. If the heroes look for him, they will need to find him and fast. Thankfully, he looks really plain looking, and they don't have a good look at what he looks like. Arriving home, he finds his mother looking at the television with a fearful look on her face as Izuku walked in. He saw that the heroes were already searching for him as she asked him a singular question. "Izuku, sweetie, what are they talking about?" Inko asked. Izuku explained to her what Katsuki told the hero as he was on his way home that day, and Inko realized the implications of how this was going to go. If they were searching for her son, then they will be looking for him as he is looking into his notebooks that Katsuki had been talking about. So she came to the only conclusion she could as she told him about her wish to leave the city where people just hated them. "Izuku, pack your things. We're going to leave all of civilization behind as we move to a small town near the center of Japan," Inko said, as Izuku immediately thought of the worst-case scenario. "Are you going to abandon my two?" Izuku asked, concerned. "No, Izuku. We are leaving this hero-filled society behind as we will live in the countryside and move to a little town called Kuo. I know that you will miss Katsuki very much, but you need to get away from that boy. He is nothing but a bully towards you, and I can't stand here and watch as he pushes you to suicide as he becomes a hero," Inko said, already packing her things. The small family collect their belongings as they get into her car and head out, leaving most of his All Might merchandise behind in the home. They make their way to the freeway as they make their journey towards their new star of life. As they were driving, Izuku felt like he was emotionally as well as physically exhausted with his day as he decided to take a nap in the car. While Inko paid attention to the road, she never noticed the red glow from her son's left hand as it pulsed to his own heartbeat. Inside the sacred gear, Izuku noticed that he was in an ethereal white plane of existence as he looked in both directions. He realized that he was all alone here and immediately called out for his mother, since he was never in this situation. "Mom, where are you?" Izuku called out, getting progressively more and more scared. "Boy, your mother isn't in this place right now. You are within the safe haven of your sacred gear," a deep, powerful voice called out. Izuku barely noticed that it sounded similar to All Might's heroic voice when in his full power form. "Well, what is happening then, sir?" Izuku asked, confused as well as scared. "My name is Drake Wygotch, and I am the spirit of the Red Dragon Emperor. Bow before my almighty power," Drake called out, revealing his full form to the boy. "Drake, why are you dragon?" Izuku screamed. "Because, young Midoriya, I am the Red Dragon of Domination, one of the twin sky heavenly dragons. You're my host for the time being until you either die of old age or die during battle against the White One," Drake called out. "So this isn't the work of a quirk?" Izuku asked, curiously stuttering. "No, this is not the power of a quirk. I came here to introduce myself and tell you that your life is about to get a whole lot more interesting," Drake called out, but Izuku felt something else was coming. "Welcome, Izuku Midoriya, to the world of the supernatural," Drake called out, smirking at his new host. Izuku woke up with a start as he saw his mother was shaking him softly. "Izuku, we're here," Inko said as she smiled at her son. Izuku looked around the place as he saw the small town that looked utterly beautiful to him, as he saw the small park in the middle of the town as well as the homes near the suburbs of the town. Not to mention the school at the top of the hill nearby, as Inko drove there immediately to get her son registered for the new year for high school. As they made it to the outer gates of the school, they were stopped by a young woman who appeared to be in their first year of high school. "Who are you?" the woman asked. She had violet-colored eyes and wore glasses over them to make herself look smarter as well as protect others from seeing her true eyes. "My name is Izuku Midoriya, and my son is here to apply to your school. I was hoping that he could join it," Inko asked, curious. "We're going to become co-ed within the year, so you will need to wait until the 13th of December in order to take the entrance exams," the woman said. "What's your name?" Inko asked. "My name is Sona Shirtorai, and I am the vice president of the student council club." "And what is your name, sir?" Sona asked curiously. "My name is Izuku Midoriya." Izuku introduced himself, and he could swear he could hear laughing coming from his head. "Well, Midoriya, I welcome you and your mother to the town of Kuo, and I certainly hope that you are more than capable of joining our school in the next year," Sona said, smiling. Izuku smiled back, although it was nervously. He never really knew why, but he was really cautious with this woman and really didn't want to stay nearby her as he looked to his mother, giving her a look asking to find their new home. Inko saw his look as she nodded at his silent question and looked towards the Sona person. Well, thank you for your hospitality. Me and my son need to find our new home. I hope that he doesn't cause you all some kind of trouble when he starts school here. Inko said, smiling. Don't worry, we take the students' time here seriously so that nothing bad happens. Should he not be capable of interacting with the girls here without being perverted, okay? Sona said, as she watched the duo leave the school. He seems like he's hiding something. I need to keep an eye on him. Sona thought to herself walking back to her class. Izuku and Inko entered their new home that they had gotten for a great price for Inko's credit. It was a small home where there was 3 bedrooms, 1 master, 2 kid rooms, as well as 2 bathrooms. The master was for his mother, while one of the smaller rooms were for Izuku, and if he has any friends coming over for the day, should he make any new friends. As they finished cleaning the house, as well as made sure that it was insect-free, they walked around the town as they wanted to get a feel for the town. It was a small town that held very kind people that never knew them in terms of quirks as well as personality. Izuku had noticed that there was a young man who hung out with a boy with glasses over his eyes, as well as a bald man, who were having a very emotional talk about something about a group. Izuku immediately left the area with his mother as they explored the town with the people looking at the new arrivals. Mom, is there a reason why people are looking at us? Izuku asked, a little scared of all the attention. We're new here, so they're looking at us because we are new to the area. I hope they are nice. Inko said, smiling. They both continued through the town as Inko found a place where she could work while Izuku went to school, and she was told to come in for the job within the week. They even found a school where Izuku could go to until he reached high school, and Izuku was going to be studying for when he entered the school. Little did the duo know that Izuku and his mother were being watched by a white-haired girl, as well as a black-haired woman who stared at both of them with either neutrality or anger. Izuku and his mother entered their home as they were preparing for them soon-to-be busy week as Izuku walked over to his mother as he looked her in the eyes. Izuku? Izuku, is there something wrong? Inko asked. Mom, I can hear a weird voice in my head. He laughs from time to time, but he seems like he wants to tell us something. Izuku said, looking at her. Inko looked at her son like he grew a second head, but she then thought that it might be him slowly but surely gaining a quirk, so she allowed him to summon whoever it was who might be his quirk. Imagine her surprise when she seen a red gauntlet appears on his hand as a voice entered the room, demanding respect as well as honor. Hello, Mrs. Midoriya. I am Drake Wygotch, and I am the heavenly red dragon of domination, one of the most powerful beings in the world. Your son has just entered the world of the supernatural. Drake called out. Inko looked at her son with a weird look, before looking at the weird gauntlet as she decides to open her mouth. Supernatural? Izuku, are you sure you're all right in the head? I know that not having a quirk made you incredibly sad, and me not believing in you made it worse, but I didn't think that you'd be insane. Inko said monotonously. I can assure you, Inko Midoriya, that this is not a joke. I am a real being that existed in the world, and I will not take kindly to my host being disrespected. Drake called out. How do you know my name? Inko asked incredulously. Mom, he saw my memories, and that is how he knows your name. But he really needs to inform you about our life now, since I am a part of the supernatural world he is talking about. Please just hear him out, Izuku said, staring her in the eyes. Inko, not having anything else to say, just nodded as she motioned for Drake to continue. My power is that of domination, and your son will be gaining power at an astronomical rate if he trains to get stronger. I know that it isn't my decision to make your son's life change, but the powers of the factions out there will be sure to seek him out to either kill him or have him join their faction. Drake informed. Well, if that is going to be happening, then why are you asking me to have him be trained? Inko asked. Well, I personally wasn't going to ask you and have your son lie to you about where he goes at night, but he doesn't wish for you to now know anything. I only want what's best for him. Drake called out. Well, I will allow you to train in the backyard, so long as you don't attract attention to these factions you told me about. Inko said, I will make sure that your son is completely aware of the world you both are now entering. Drake said, seriously. Inko looked at the gauntlet, as she was serious, as well as she sat down on the couch, as she had Izuku lay his head on her lap. Thousands of years ago, before humanity had even made its mark in history as one of the most complex species in the world, there were many factions where godly beings resided within. There was the Shinto faction, the Christian faction, the Norse, Greek, and many others. But there was a war going on between three of these factions, but here was the thing. These three were within one of the ones named. They were the Christian faction. The devils, angels, and fallen had waged war against each other since they hated each other's guts. The war lasted for millenniums, and it never ended during the time where humanity had begun to make its steps known to the world at large. During this war, two foolish dragons had fought over a mate, and it didn't end well for the factions when they tried to get in the way for these two dragons. These two were the twin sky heavenly dragons, the red dragon of domination and the white dragon of supremacy. They were fighting for a mate because they want a legacy to send off so they could continue their line of lineage. But the other encroached on the other's territory and tried to take the mate of their eternal rival. So they ended up fighting over the specific mate, and their battle was so intense they interrupted the battle that was going on between the three factions. Knowing that this fight might just end the world, the three factions teamed up with a temporary truce as they fought against the red dragon and the white dragon. It didn't end well for both parties, as the dragons in the end were defeated and placed within sacred gears created by God of the Angels faction and was forced to be the servants of humanity. But it was during that time frame that something happened to the leaders of each army. The angels lost their leader and God to a fallen angel named Kokobeel, while the devils lost their 4 devil kings to God himself when the battle had started. When the battle was over, Kokobeel stood over the bodies of the 4 great devil kings, as well as God, as he roared in triumph. But as all things go, there was a peace to prevent more wars, as all the factions left it after their crumbling blows in the great war between one another. After this was the Devil Civil War, as the devils fought amongst themselves since they had the most population of the 3 factions, as they vied for power amongst themselves in order to keep the peace going. For new Satans were instated as the new Devil Kings. Their names are Surzex Lucifer, Seraphol Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus. These 4 led the new Devil faction to peace, driving out the old Satan faction, as they merely wished to continue the fight against the other and win the Great War instead of focusing on their numbers. As soon as they were driven out, they went under the radar until now. I have no idea what is happening, but during this time, I was under the previous Red Dragon Emperor. He was extremely perverted, and I didn't wish to stay with him as he merely wished to be with women over fighting in battle. Drake said, giving his story. Izuku and Inko had listened intently as they heard his tale, and it was a sad but beautiful one. But Izuku felt that there was some kind of resentment within Drake, so he questioned it. Drake, are you angry about what happened to you? Izuku asked, curious. There is never a time that I regret my decision to try and find a mate. But I will never think that I will regret defending my mate from my natural enemy. Drake said, smiling inside. Izuku looked to his mother as she was looking back at him. They exchanged nods as Izuku looked at his hand as he lifted it in the air to show that he was looking at the dragon. Drake, there is nothing more that I wish than to free you from your prison. I think that you are within your right to defend your mate, and that you are getting punished for defending yourself wasn't the right thing to do. So I will become strong enough to make sure that you can be freed from your prison. Brother, Izuku said, smiling at the gauntlet. I will call you brother when you release me from this thing. But thanks for the sentimentality, Drake said, as he was smirking maniacally. Izuku would go to sleep that night as he was changing his clothes. He noticed something odd about his body. When I get this fit, I don't remember becoming like this. Izuku mumbled as he looked at himself in the mirror. Consider this an upgrade from when you got beaten by that ash blonde one. I needed a host that will survive this world, and you will become more draconic the longer you wield the sacred gear. Drake said. Izuku would go to sleep that night as he trained inside the sacred gear in order to manage to keep the power he could get from it. By the way, partner, the woman you met at Kuo Academy, was actually a devil, Drake said, causing the boy to wake up immediately as he was sweating up a storm. Izuku woke up the next morning after he got back home from his walk around the town with his mother, with Drake telling him to train as fast as possible. "All right, kid, I want you to run all around the town before doing some regular pull-ups on the monkey bars in the park. After that, I want you to do some push-ups in your room. Once those are done for the day, you will work on mastering your power of fire, as well as my own boosting powers. You need to be capable of entering your balance breaker by the end of the year," Drake said from within the gear. "Drake, you should become an exercise coach," Izuku said, getting his shoes on. "Why do you say that?" the dragon asked curiously. "Because you are inspiring me to work harder with your work ethic," Izuku said, exiting the house as his mother made breakfast. "Well, it's my job to make sure that you can survive the world you are about to enter. I wouldn't want my newest host to be killed off right off the bat," Drake said as Izuku ran down the street. "Well, Drake, I want you to know that you can talk to me whenever you need to. I am here to be your friend, not a partner," Izuku said, turning around an intersection. "Why do you hopelessly see me as a friend? I have killed millions just to attain the power that I have. I am the dragon of domination, not the dragon of friendliness," the dragon said. "It's your job to make me as intimidating as possible. It's my job to at least have some allies around the area," Izuku said, smiling as he ran. While he was running around the town, he helped the people around the town if they needed some assistance in moving stuff from one area to the next. Not to mention, he helped old ladies cross the road as well to make sure that they were safe. Drake was watching this, and he couldn't help but be alarmed by the fact that Izuku hadn't even thought about his own safety for gaining his power. "Izuku Midoriya, what is your dreams to become in this world?" Drake asked suddenly. "Huh? What do you mean, Drake?" Izuku asked, stopping at the park to look at his hand. "I mean that you are not even looking after yourself. The only reason you are even getting stronger is to make sure that you can protect your mother, correct?" Drake asked, a little angry. "Is it not okay to protect one's family?" Izuku asked sadly. "It is not a bad thing to protect the ones you love, but you need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. I have had many hosts who never watched over their own health before they took their own lives when fighting an opponent," Drake said, revealing something about previous hosts. "Drake, my dream used to be that I wanted to become a hero. I really still want to become one. But with you, someone will think that I lied about having a quirk in the first place. Especially Kaken," Izuku said, muttering the last part. "I don't care about what others think of me. You can still become a hero. How about you become a hero to the supernatural?" Drake asked, looking at Izuku from the gear confused. "I can't, Drake. I've been told all my life that not having a quirk will be my own downfall. Not to mention, I won't be capable of getting any jobs with my quirklessness as part of my resume. One look at my file, and they will reject me. Everyone in my life rejected my dreams to become a hero," Izuku said, sitting on a bench as he started to cry. "Who said that a quirkless person couldn't become a hero? Because from what I know about them in your mind, they get treated the same as you are, and they still get jobs around the world," Drake said. "Drake, did it ever occur to you that we are in Japan? The one place in the world that doesn't allow quirkless people to even have jobs?" Izuku asked, still wiping his tears. "What has happened in the last 200 years since I was last reborn?" Drake called out angrily. "A lot has happened. In order to get a job, you need a quirk specifically for that said job. To become a hero, you need a quirk to rely on in order to become a hero. In order to become a vigilante, you need a quirk to beat someone up. Not to mention being a villain will automatically cause me to be completely underestimated. Not only that, but people will beat me if they have more experience than me. No amount of planning will ever get me far in this world. I am just born a useless, worthless human being. And even then, I'm treated like I am an animal that needs to be put down. Everyone treats me like I am just not even human and wishes death upon me. I sometimes even think it myself," Izuku said, looking at the sky. "Well, let's get away from this kind of thinking. We can't become stronger with this on our mind," Drake said, as Izuku got up and went to working out. Izuku returned home as he found his mother placing breakfast on the table with a smile on her face. "I'm home," Izuku said, taking off his shoes. "Welcome home, Izuku. I made your favorite today," Inko said, as Izuku started to salivate. Inko chuckles as she watched as Izuku dug into his meal. She couldn't help but smile sadly about how similar he looked to his father before he was killed. Inko knew that the man she married was a villain, but at the same time, she knew that he cared for her and her son, considering that he always knew where they lived as well as cared enough to send them money from wherever he was. So imagine her surprise when they hear a knock on the door, and when Izuku went to open it, he found a man in a suit and tie standing there, with a luggage box stating his name. "Hello everyone, I'm finally home," the man said, looking around the room. "Hisashi," Inko called out, and when she saw his face, she was horrified. "Hisashi, what happened to you?" Inko fretted. "It was a freak accident. I was attacked and nearly killed," he said, hugging Izuku's mother. Izuku, for his part, was looking at the man who was supposedly his father with caution, but at the most part the reason he was so cautious was because he never met his real father before. "Hello, son. I can't explain how sorry I am for how you were forced to come here," he said, giving Izuku a hug. To Izuku, he couldn't tell why, but when this man hugged him, all he saw was his father with black hair that was similar to Izuku's, but it was now gone. But all that he thought of was, "It's warm. This hug is warm," Izuku thought as he slowly started to cry. He had never truly met his father, ever since he was born, and to now see him and feel the warmth that he should have had for his entire life made him want to tell him all about what he missed in his school days. "I have a few friends in this town watching over you too. I could never understand why they wanted to go after my son. I know he always wanted to become a hero. But to see him ridiculed as a villain for just taking notes on his favorite heroes is making me furious," Hisashi said as he pulled his son into his arms. For Drake, seeing this 7-foot-tall man hugging his host, it made him think that Izuku was a baby Drake in the arms of their parents. Because as soon as Izuku was picked up, almost instinctively he curled his legs to his chest as his father chuckled. "You always did that whenever I picked you up," Hisashi said, smiling at his son with a happy and fond smile. Where were you?" Izuku asked, crying in his father's arms. "I have been recovering from a wound given to me by All Might," Hisashi said, frowning. "All Might nearly killed you," Inko called out. Izuku was now confused. Why would All Might go after his father? Was he a villain? A vigilante? Why would All Might go after you? Izuku asked, clearing his tears. His father had sat down with Izuku, sitting on his lap now, as his father cleared as much tears as he could from Izuku's eyes. "My son, I hope you don't hate me for what I am about to say. I am the villain from the boogeyman stories your mother told you as a child. I am all for one. I am the antithesis of your idol. He is holding the quirk I have so long desired in order to make my brother finally rest. But with him holding the quirk, he has been forcing my brother to never rest until I have been either killed or defeated." All for One said. As Izuku looked at his father, he could only think of one thing to say. "If you're a villain, does that mean that Mom was one in the past as well?" Izuku asked, a little scared. "No, your mother was never a villain. In fact, she was a hero in her past, but retired due to her being the family way with you." All for One said, smiling. "What? How is she capable of being a hero?" Izuku asked, curious. "I was the telekinetic heroine, Psychos," Inko said, blushing. Over time, her ability to use her quirk in the way she needed to continue her time as a heroine was declining, so she retired once she became aware of her state with you. All for One said, smirking. "I will have you know, old man, that I was prego with Izuku for over a year." "How does that even happen?" Inko complained. "Well, in order to make sure you both are safe, I have made my new base in this town in order to protect you both. I hope that you will be fine with me staying with you both." All for One said, "Sure thing, I need a father figure in my life." "Dad," Izuku said, blushing. "All right, now in order to understand what is going to be happening, Drake, you might want to make your presence known." All for One said, causing Izuku and Inko to be surprised by his knowledge of the supernatural. "Dad, how do you know Drake?" Izuku asked, concerned. "He knows me because I was in him as my previous host. He was the best user of my quirk before All Might came along. Not only was he immortal, but he was the strongest host I ever had in my time as being a sacred gear." Drake called out, "Wait, but my dad is still alive. How are you and me then?" Izuku asked, confused even more. I gave him to you, my son. All for One said. What? How does that even work? Izuku asked. I placed some of my soul in you, is how you got your love of quirks to be noted down in notebooks. With my soul in you, so did Drake's soul move to yours. Since you were part of me, my son, I could successfully move my soul back while simultaneously keeping Drake inside you. Hisashi said, I will think about all this later. Can we hang out today? Inko said, looking at her husband and son. I don't see why not. Izuku and Hisashi say at the same time. Looking at one another, they found something else they have in common. Spending time with Inko was one of their greatest pastimes. Izuku was walking towards the school that he submitted his online application to, Kuo Academy. It was the only high school in the area that was close to his home, and Izuku wasn't complaining about it. He was near the school's yard when he was approached by one of the clubs there, the Kendo club. Who are you? And why are you entering the premises? A pink-haired girl yelled at him. Moving back, he pulled out his application that was approved for him to enter the school. I got this application for the school here approved. This school is being co-ed, and I was one of the males accepted right away. Izuku said, looking away from the girls. Since they were in their Kendo uniforms, their racks were showing a little from the small peaks of their yukatas. Nodding in confirmation about the paper, a brown-haired girl gives him the paper back. It's true. He was one of the people who were joining this school. I have only one more question for you. Izuku Midoriya, the brown-haired girl said, staring into his eyes. Yes? Izuku asked, why are you in this school anyway? She asked, staring into his admittedly adorable, round, emerald eyes. There's no other high school in the area inside Kuo, so this was the only place left. I wouldn't wish to leave this town anyway. Izuku said, looking sad. Looking into his eyes after pulling his face to look into the eyes, the girl stared for at least a minute as Izuku was panicking in her hold. All right, I believe you, but you better not peek on the girls when they're changing, she said, angrily. Izuku nodded his head and ran off towards the school, but leaving behind a notebook that he was writing in on his way there. Huh? The girl asked, curiously picking up the notebook. Opening it up, she saw the entries in there as she saw many quirks that were written down as well as the drawings of each hero as well as villain inside. Wow, he has some talent in terms of drawing skills. But he could have made MT ladies' racks a bit bigger. They're at least cup D in size. The brown-haired girl said, what are you reading? The pink-haired girl asked. It seems our newest male student entering our school has accidentally left his notebook. We should return it later. He probably will want it back. The girl said, well, Murayama, we need to head to class. The pink-haired girl said, all right, K-Taste, let's go. We will need to practice our moves later on anyway. Maybe we can get him to join our club here. Murayama said, walking away. Izuku was having a dilemma. He really wanted to just disappear into the ground and never return to the world. He was introduced into the classroom as he was told to inform the class about his quirk status as well as his hobbies. After saying his hobbies and not his quirk, he went to his chair as everyone had been talking to one another about why he didn't mention his quirk. Because now as the class was about to start, many people were asking him what his quirk was, and he didn't know if he had it in him to take any more abuse from others. Please just stop asking, Izuku muttered. As this was heard by the other girls, they immediately went to learn more about him as well as see if they could get him to slip up in showing his quirk or if he didn't have one at all. Based on his actions in class, though, they all thought of him as the cinnamon roll type of character in their homeroom. But as the day went on, Izuku couldn't understand why people were all about learning what each other's quirks were. But it all came to a head when someone blurted out that he might be quirkless, and that was why he didn't want to talk about it. But as soon as they said that, because they were watching him closely, they saw him flinch at the notion of being quirkless. And that made them smile as they pressed even harder. Hey, are you really quirkless? The other girl asked with a smug look. I don't want to answer that, Izuku said, looking back at his coursework. But before he could say anything more to deny the claim, the girl laughed. Geez, didn't think that there was any quirkless left in this day and age. But here you are. Are you a born quirkless, or were you so useless that your quirk abandoned you? The smug girl asked, smiling. Izuku, not giving her any reaction, as well as a retort, just continued his work. It was now known that Izuku was quirkless and managed to get into the school. And here is where it would begin once again. He would get bullied by others, and he wouldn't get to have a great childhood. As Izuku tried to hide within his arms, the girls around him soon became like demons in his classroom as his breath started to pick up. But as soon as it did pick up, he immediately beat the panic attack down. He wouldn't show weakness here in front of so many women. They already hate him now. He doesn't need to show them something else to pick on him for. It was around lunchtime when Izuku had gotten his first letter telling him to kill himself. Not even in school for a whole day, and he was told to kill himself. He sighed as he ripped the letter apart and threw it away. He didn't want to deal with this today. He sat under a tree in the courtyard as he was getting ready to pull out his notebook, only to find it missing. Huh, I could have sworn that it was in there. Izuku mumbled as he searched his backpack. Hey, Quirkless, a girl called out. Izuku, looking up, found a girl with a very good figure looking at him as he stared up at her in confusion. Why aren't you looking at me? She asked, since his eyes were looking away. Your skirt, Izuku said, moving his head in a direction away from the girl. Last thing he needed was that he was a pervert on the list of things people could say about him. The girl then got a smug look on her face as she then leaned down toward Izuku's face before she spoke. Well, I didn't tell you to look there, did I? The girl questioned. I didn't mean to look. It was the wind that moved your skirt. I promise that I didn't look there. Izuku stuttered, uselessly before sighing. The girl, perplexed about his behavior, immediately sat down next to him, making him uncomfortable. So, you didn't mean to look there. Were you a man or a beach? The girl asked, as Izuku looked at her in confusion. Why are you sitting next to me? Aren't I supposed to be beaten up or something? Izuku asked. I can do that if you want, she suggested, as Izuku looked away. I would rather not. Izuku muttered. What did you say? Peasant? She asked angrily. I would rather not be beaten up, Izuku said, shivering. Well then, I don't care, the girl said as she pulled out a bat and knocked him out with one swing. Trigger warning: bullying/abuse. As soon as Izuku's eyes saw darkness, she watched as he fell to the ground in front of himself. She then swung the bat onto his back as well as legs in order to make her pain to him known. That is for taking all the attention from me. Slam, that was for making me look embarrassed. Slam, and this slam is for making me look like an idiot for talking to you. She screamed, slamming the bat on his lower stomach, waking him up immediately. Gah! Izuku groaned. Looking up in the air, he found the girl who was talking to him as she was holding a bat covered in vital fluid. What happened? Izuku asked, placing his hand on the back of his head as he felt something moving there. Pulling his hand back, he only saw vital fluid as his breathing started to increase as he was undergoing a panic attack that even Drake couldn't even stop. All Izuku could think of when looking at his own vital fluid was how it was so similar to that one time he was beaten by Kaken to the point that he wished for death to take him. He had broken a few bones in his arm multiple times as well as his legs 3 times in that beatdown. As Izuku tried to get up from the ground, he felt like his left leg was extremely hurt to the point he couldn't lift it. What happened? Why is my left leg hurting? Izuku asked, before seeing the girl who was standing there with the bat stared at him like he was ridiculous. Wow, I really knocked you senseless. I gave you a little amnesia, she said happily. Swinging again, Izuku immediately caught the weapon, causing the girl's face to darken. Izuku looked at her with true fear as he was not sure whether or not to be afraid of her or the entire gender of women completely. Not wanting to think about it more, he tossed the weapon away before limping towards the nurse's office. Trigger warning over. Izuku entered the office only to find that the nurse wouldn't even take care of him as well. So he left the room looking like he just came out of a fight and was barely able to stand. He couldn't do anything about the rest of his day since he couldn't really feel anything in his head, but out of all the things he could think of, the worst part, he was slowly losing vital fluid from his head, and he was getting lightheaded. Dark spots were appearing at the edges of his vision from being beaten with a bat. As the class continued, Izuku's vision had declined to the point that only one girl noticed his bobbing head, as well as the stains caking his upper face. And as he was about to fall, she immediately screamed, Midoriya, someone go get the nurse. Because as soon as she screamed, The whole class watched as Izuku Midoriya had collapsed to the floor next to his desk. Sona was many things, but surprised was not one of them. She had never thought that one of the girls would openly attack a defenseless young man who didn't do anything to garner any kind of attention except for the fact that he didn't have what others did. A quirk. Has society fallen to the point that they only care for those who have quirks? Does his mother even care for him because of his status without a quirk? These questions need to be answered as she walked over to the nurse's office in order to find out what the hell happened. She had heard from people around the place that Izuku was sitting silently eating under a tree near the occult research club room when a blonde-haired girl walked over to him and had a nice chat. It didn't seem that bad until the girl started to get a little irritated and slammed him with a bat over the head, but it didn't end there. Based on the accounts of others in the area, the girl openly mocked him as he was out cold on the ground from the sudden attack. She had beaten him so bad with a weapon that he had momentary amnesia, and it wouldn't spell good for his mind to only think of women as people who wish to attack whenever you let your guard down. Not only that, but the very same girl had begun spreading rumors about him being a perverted beast that would attack you when you were most vulnerable, and that couldn't be further than the truth. Izuku Midoriya. From what Sona had heard about from the teachers, as well as other students who didn't wish to get in the way of the obvious bullying, had stated that he was an attentive student, as well as very kind to others. So the fact that he was a perverted beast was very not true, not to mention the fact that in his latest class he was nearly unconscious when he had sat down at his desk. But as the class went on based on her servant's retelling of events, Izuku had been nodding off the entire time as the teacher and other students openly mocked him for being so weak. So when Sona arrived in the nurse's office, she found the nurse directly trying to poison Izuku to death from the poison in her hands. Taking the woman down, Sona called her peerage to call the police on the woman for attempted murder of the first degree. Looking at the unconscious Izuku, she found that his wounds hadn't gotten better but were slightly healing from the damage. As she placed some binds over the woman's hands, she walked over to Izuku's sleeping form as she noticed that his body was steaming from the amount of heat it was projecting. She looked back at the woman and led her out of the nurse's office and down the hall to the front gate of the school where the police were waiting. Returning from her journey to the police, Sona found Izuku getting up from the bed without any injuries to his body, as well as his skin being red as if he was sunburned. Izuku Midoriya, what the hell happened? Sona asked as she stared at him in shock. As Izuku stared at her in horror, he looked around himself before stating a question. I can explain? Izuku asked nervously. Oh, please do, Sona said, staring at him in disbelief. Well, would you believe me if I said that I knew about the supernatural? Izuku asked, trying to deflect the question. How would you know about the supernatural? You don't belong to any species that are of Greek, Japanese, and others. So what can you tell me? Sona asked curiously. Well, I guess it's because I have a dragon inside my head, Izuku said as a question. What kind of dragon? Sona asked, curious. Well, he is big and red, Izuku stated, before being stopped by a red gauntlet being shown on his left arm. Drake, we shouldn't be revealing you yet, Izuku scrambled to say before Drake's voice was heard around the room. I will inform you, Citri, that you are not to underestimate us. We are the Red Dragon Emperor, and we will allow you know about us and the fact that I have been training him to become strong enough to protect his mother, Drake said, doubting Sona's ability to understand. I see. Well, if you wish to continue your time here training without Rias knowing about you, then you will need to stay under the radar. I will keep you unknown to Rias, and if she decides to add you to her peerage, then you will at least hear her out should she come to you about joining her, all right? Sona asked, looking at Izuku sternly. Sure thing. I'm not sure whether or not if she will talk to me, though, but I am willing to wait, Izuku said, looking away. I will talk to you later, but I will need to know about how you activated your sacred gear, Sona said as she sat down next to Izuku. They went on about how their lives went before coming to Kuo, before Izuku had to leave for home. He couldn't even get home late because of his mother's worry about his actions at school. Arriving home from his long day of school, Izuku never heard about the fact that Sona went out on a rage against the students of her school. As Izuku entered his home, he found his mother at the dinner table, crying as she was holding a letter for her, and her body was shaking very badly. As Izuku dropped his bag on the floor, he ran over to his mother to make sure that she was all right. "Mom, are you okay? What happened? Where's Dad?" Izuku asked in quick succession. "Your dad has left us again, and this time it's for good," Inko said, crying. Izuku watched as she was crying her heart out as he grabbed the letter, and he read it for himself, and he couldn't even be angrier. His father had just abandoned them for the fact that he needed to let them know how evil he really was. And to add further insult to injury, he had implanted that memory into Drake, as he never was a host of the Dragon Emperor. As Izuku was showing his fury, he couldn't allow it to be seen for all to see, as he really didn't want to be found out this early by Rias. And if he would be forced to become her servant. As he was focusing on controlling his anger, he found his mother hugging him from behind as she was helping him cool down his anger to the point it was done. "I knew that we shouldn't have let him in our home. I had a really bad feeling about him when I first met him," Izuku grumbled as he stewed in his anger. As they ate their dinner for the night, Izuku entered the realm of his sacred gear in order to train himself harder to get strong enough to defend himself and his mother from any enemies they might make. Izuku was launching punches and kicks as he made sure that his technique was as perfect as possible in order to increase his fighting potential. He knew that being capable of boosting would increase his ability to last longer in a fight, but if he were to increase his natural power at his base, he would be more capable of growing in strength since he would be increasing his base strength. As he was training with Drake, he was constantly annoyed by the previous hosts telling him to activate his Juggernaut drive in order to obtain ultimate power, but he promptly ignored their presence as if they never existed. As the training continued, Drake made his presence known behind Izuku as he announced Izuku's next part of his training. "All right, partner. You need to see how many boosts you need to increase your power to the next level," Drake said, staring at his partner with pride. Izuku had been making great strides in increasing his power to the point that he was steadily getting closer to achieving Balance Breaker. It would only be a matter of time before Izuku attained the power for himself and truly started his journey to becoming the strongest Red Dragon Emperor. Although he will be having a fear of women now, because of his experience with how one just beat him half to death just for having lunch with her. He will be going to help him work on that in order to make him a formidable fighter as well as a worthy adversary for the White One. Your power grows leaps and bounds at a fast pace, partner. You will need to increase your power in base as well as when you have your sacred gear activated at all times. Not to mention the fact that your mind needs to be honed to the point of perfection. Albion will be laughing in his grave for the smart host I had gotten. I don't even care that you are completely human. I will enjoy using your intellect to make our escapades legendary." Drake called out, laughing. As Izuku watched the dragon laugh his butt off, Izuku went back into his training in order to summon the gear as fast as possible, as well as increase his power capable of being used by the gear whenever he can possible. Waking up the next morning, Izuku had been aware that the Citri family had known about his entrance into the supernatural. Not only that, but he had been made awfully aware that his mother was making his favorite food katsudan for breakfast today, and he couldn't say no to that. Entering the kitchen after changing his clothes to be that of the Kuo Academy uniform, Izuku had decided to eat his breakfast as he was on his way to the school. Entering the schoolyard, he was found to enter the Kendo club gym as he grabbed a wooden bokken as he started to swing it in a way that was similar to the girls. He would continue this training in order to learn how to wield a sword, since he can't rely on his fist for the rest of his supernatural life. It wasn't long after he started that the Kendo girls had entered their gym only to find a sweaty and fully decked out Izuku using one of their blades to train himself. "Midoriya, what are you doing in our training room?" Kates, a pink-haired girl who had small rack but had a nice rear, called out angrily. "Just training. I didn't mean to interrupt anything," Izuku said, dropping the sword. "Well, get out of our training room. We need to train," Kates said, as Izuku ran off, placing the Kendo blade away. Izuku had woke up this morning with his life being more capable of being a hero to something. Drake had told him that training in swordsmanship was a good idea since he had to do something to increase his skills in other weapons as well as other hobbies he can have other than his hero hunting of quirks. It had been a few weeks since his leaving of Mizudafu, and Izuku had heard of the attack on UA Academy as they were attacked by villains. But there was one guy who helped them in defending the students. It was a young student who was named Issei Hayudu. He had ultimately defended his allies from the villains while he was placed in the hospital because his quirk had broken his limbs. But aside from it, the only bad injury from the teachers of UA was Aizawa Shota and Pro Heroine 13. Other than those two, the others were fine in that school, and Izuku couldn't be any more happy for them. He was walking to school when he was approached by Murayama and Keitase, the co-captain and secretary of the Kendo Club, as he was now alert by their presence near him. "You're Izuku Midoriya, correct?" Murayama asked curiously. "Yes, I am Izuku Midoriya," Izuku said, as he stared at them, a little bit of fright within him. "Gonna have to work on your fear of women, kid," Drake said in his mind. Izuku mentally nodded at the dragon within his soul as he focused on what the two girls in front of him were going to talk to him about. "We saw you were training in the club room yesterday, and want to know if you were interested in becoming one of the Kendo Club's newest members?" Keitase asked, looking away. "What brought this on?" Izuku asked. "Well, we came into the club yesterday and chased you off, and we wanted to see if you'd join us if we asked for forgiveness in exchange," Murayama said, looking him in the eye. "That's fine. You don't need to ask for forgiveness. I was actually trying to learn how to use a blade from in there. I had no idea that was where you trained. But I'd love to join you both in your club," Izuku said, smiling towards them, causing them to blush. "Well, meet us in the gym later on today, after class," Murayama said, pulling Keitase away. "Sure thing," Izuku said, walking towards class. The end of the class was coming as Izuku was mentally preparing for himself to train under the Kendo girls in order to learn how to wield a blade like them. He was entering the club room when he was about to turn around. He found a blade to the back of his neck. "Why are you in here?" one of the girls of the club called out. "I am joining the club, on orders from Murayama and Keitase," Izuku said, stuttering. "Why? You could have told them no," the girl said, angrily looking into his back. "I wanted to learn how to use a sword. I think I might need to use a weapon at some point in my life, whether it be a gun, sword, shield, anything to defend myself. I would like to know how to use," Izuku said, finally turning around as he looked into the girl's eyes fearfully. Leaning in closer, the girl stared into his eyes, knowing that a boy would only lie to get in here with such a farce of an excuse, but didn't find any. "So you want to learn how to use a blade?" she asked, a little more docile than before. "Yes, if you'll have me learn," Izuku said, looking away from the girl. "Well, you need to gain a uniform for the Kendo Club, since you're joining based on the information Murayama and Keitase saying that you can join. Follow me," the girl said, leading him to a locker room that was empty. As they entered the room, Izuku sat down on the bench in front of a locker as the girl from before had stood in front of him with his Kendo uniform. "This uniform is to not be brought home under any circumstances. Other than that, you are free to learn the blade of Kendo here from the co-captain and myself, as well as the other girls. Make sure to let me know if you wish to leave at any point in time," the girl said, getting ready to walk away. "Wait," Izuku called out. "What?" the girl asked, annoyed already. "What's your name?" Izuku asked. The girl smirked at him as he finally noticed that she never introduced herself to him in the time that she got to know him. "My name is Osami Takosha, and I'm the captain of the Kendo Club," she said, introducing herself before leaving. As Izuku now learned the Kendo Club captain's name, he got his gear on as he walked into the Kendo Club training room as he moved closer to the group, while making himself the outlier. "All right, everyone, we have a new recruit being welcomed into the Kendo Club. I know that there are rumors about him being a pervert, but from what I have seen, he is nothing of the sort. So treat him how you wish to be treated and nothing bad will happen," Osami said, smiling at the girls. As the girls looked around for their new arrival, they only found Izuku wearing their uniform, which was designed for the male populace of the school, should they decide to join. And they couldn't lie. He looked good wearing their uniform, since he was perfectly fitting the uniform as it was tight against his body. "Can't you get something that is a little bit bigger?" Izuku whined, He was stretching the uniform a little since he wasn't used to the attention he was getting. "What are you talking about? We got your measurements, and this is what we got back," Osami said, smirking at Izuku. "These may be my exact measurements, but I would rather not show my physique off so flauntingly. I feel like I'm being objectified," Izuku said, pouting. Well, this was all they could do at the moment. "When I get the time, I will ask them to change the size to one a bit bigger, all right?" Murayama said, looking at Izuku with him, giving her a sad nod. "All right, girls, we are to show our new recruit how the cookie crumbles, as I always say. Show him how to use the blade, and then show him how to fight with one," Osami said, motivating the girls. As Izuku was being trained by the girls as they smacked him in the back with their wooden blades whenever he got a form wrong, Osami, Murayama, and Keitase were all sitting on the bleachers talking to one another as they watched Izuku's training by the girls. "So what do you girls think of him?" Osami asked, curiously. "We found him training here yesterday, and he was extremely scared of us when we called him out on it," Murayama said, sadly. "What do you mean by that?" Osami asked, a little angry. "He seems to have a slight to dangerous fear of women, based on one of our classmates who attacked him during lunch a few weeks ago. It was Sona who helped him in his time of need when he was found with bruises as well as a bleeding head in class," Keitase said, as she watched as Izuku mimicked the other girls' forms. Another slap to the back, and Murayama began to speak about him. "He really isn't a pervert from what I've seen. He is a quirkless boy in this world, just trying to survive in it. Nobody was his friend, and now that he is getting some kind of attention that wasn't from his mother is worrying me," Murayama said, watching as Izuku was noticeably flinching whenever a girl was about to yell at him. "I can see what you mean. He was bullied relentlessly in the past school," Osami started. "Or he is naturally meek towards others, and the girl's fear was beaten into him just a few weeks ago," Keitase finished. Although it was Murayama who had the best option out of both of them that nailed the coffin for Izuku. Maybe it was a bit of both. He was really meek towards the others in the school, even the guys that showed up here. That perverted duo really tried to get him to join them as a trio. But if he was both bullied as well as meek in the past, Murayama gets ready to start. Then we have our work cut out for us if we wish for him to open up to us about his past. Everyone here is a girl with us is like family. And with him here, it's like he is the little brother in a family of One-Sans," Keitase said. "I just hope that he can get better at his forms, since it seems like he will need some one-on-one training with us," Murayama said, watching as Izuku was slapped on the back, sending him to the ground. "I think the girls are being too hard on him," Osami said, walking down. Murayama and Keitase on the other hand stayed where they were as they watched as Izuku was getting up while holding his back in pain. He really needs to get over his fear of women if someone decides to take him on with his weakness to girls, Keitase said as she stared at Murayama. "He won't stand a chance at living," Murayama finished, unknowingly sealing their fate in the group that Izuku will gain in the future. The end of the day approached as Izuku was cleaning himself up from the day of training with the Kendo girls that day. He was really thankful for their help, even though the other girls may have hit him a little too hard on the back to form some new bruises, adding to his already tantalizing amount. "I just wish that Kaken never attacked me like that mentally," Izuku sighed as he took his shower. As he was getting ready to get out of the shower, he never heard someone entering the room and sitting in the chair next to his shower. He walked out of the shower with his towel over his shoulder, thinking that no one was inside the room, and he went to his locker unaware that a girl was watching him change in front of him. After getting his shirt on, he then started to hear the mumblings of a girl in heat as he froze in place, before turning around only to come face to face with a girl with brown hair and glasses over her violet-colored eyes. She had a small pair of rack that worked well with her slightly wide hips as she stared into his eyes as Izuku Jr. rose at attention. Izuku, realizing his situation, immediately screamed, "Murder," before covering himself and hiding in a corner of the room. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Izuku screamed, attracting the attention of some of the Kendo Club girls. "Huh? What's Midoriya screaming about?" Osami asked Murayama. They were walking near the boys' changing room when they found it wide open with a brown-haired, violet-colored-eyed girl slowly making her way over to Izuku, who was trembling in the corner with his hands over his pages. "Hey, get out of here," AIK. We don't need you perving out on our new recruit. Murayama called out, pulling the girl away as Osami stood in front of Izuku. This is the first time that a male has entered the Kendo club. I had to see what he was like. And I have to say, Osami, I like him. Not to mention what he's packing. Aika called out as she was dragged away. Sorry about that, Midoriya. We never knew that she's really come here to see you, Osami said, as she saw Izuku's trembling form as it slowed. It's fine. If she just wanted to see me, all she needed to do was ask, Izuku said, looking away blushing. Oh my god, he's an airhead cinnamon roll, Osami said, as she looked down to Izuku Jr. She was surprised by its size and promptly left the room before he could be more embarrassed by the situation he was in. All in all, Izuku's day was really good and somewhat weird, but he wouldn't have it any other way. Izuku had been training for a full month now, and he was already a part of the Kendo club in terms of strength as well as skill. He had been training with Murayama and Keitase exclusively because of his personality being more leaning towards them, as he was more scared of the other women of the school. He had known that Sona knew that he knew about the supernatural world, and he was needed to meet with Gremory soon in order for him to become her servant soon. He had told Sona that he would wait for Rias to show interest in him before he did anything of the sort. But overall, he was genuinely surprised when he was training with the girls when he was approached by Kiba, the school's pretty boy of the school, as he challenged Izuku to a sword fight. So Izuku sat outside the Kendo Club's gym room in order to wait for Kiba to arrive with his own gown of Kendo, as well as weapon of choice. Izuku stood up from his stood wearing the Kendo uniform as he looked over at Kiba, as he stood in the Kuo uniform, as he looked at Izuku with a mirth in his eyes. Izuku got into his fighting stance with the blade as he lowered his guard in order to throw the boy off guard, and it worked as the boy slightly widened his eyes but remained calm and collected. Izuku finished placing himself in his stance as he was as close to the ground as possible as his sword was placed behind his body as he used his aura in order to make it look intimidating. Kiba watched as a fiery aura was blasted around Izuku as Izuku's face was that of a smile as well as a serious expression. I will end this in one hit, Izuku said, as he watched Kiba merely smirk at the boy. As they launched at one another as they were shown as differing fighters with opposing auras as they clashed blades. Izuku's blade was shown to have a dragon behind him as well as in the attack. The blade had become crimson red as it smashed through his wooden blade and sent the boy back a few meters as the area around him exploded with massive power. Kiba, though, only felt like he was being given a warm fire to keep him from being hurt, as Kiba then felt the pain of the blade smacking into his gut, sending him to one knee. Murayama and Keitase had been watching the fight with great interest since Kiba was a swordsman and had been challenging Izuku, their novice Kendo student, to a battle. It was also surprising that Izuku stood over Kiba as he was given the aura of an impossible opponent to defeat. As the girls stared in shock as Kiba did the same, Izuku then became a blushing mess as he, unlike Kiba, was now completely naked as he ran off screaming. As he ran past Murayama and Keitase, both girls felt the world slow down to slow motion as they looked down at Izuku's PP as they found something standing at attention and was very large in size. As time seemed to speed back up, they became a blushing mess as Izuku made his way back into the locker rooms. They didn't expect Kiba to begin laughing as he stood back up from his position from the ground. I never knew that he was that skilled with a blade, Kiba said, as both girls were looking at him with curiosity. What do you mean? Keitase asked, confused. He used an aura to make himself look more intimidating, but not only did he intimidate me completely, but he placed himself in a disadvantageous position by placing his stance so close to the ground. It was a great battle, even though it was ended in a single attack. I wonder what he names the attack, Kiba asked as he looked at the girls. If you're referring to that aura as well as dragon-like attack, then he calls it as stoic art. Flame breathing, Rengoku, Murayama said, smirking. Does he have any other attack names? Kiba asks. He has this attack name where he calls it Flame Tiger, as well as Blazing Universe, Unknowing Fire, rising scorching sun, blooming flame, undulation. Those are the attack names he made. But I know he got that from the anime Demon Slayer, or known as Kimetsu no Yaiba. Kate said, chuckling. Well, at least I know what to look out for in the future. Wanting to talk to Bucho in order to get her some time to get to talk to him soon. She has been watching him for a while. Kiba said, before Murayama stood in his way. He will be staying in our club, Kiba. He is our clubmate, not yours. Murayama said, don't worry, he won't be stolen from you. Bucho just want to talk to him, nothing more, nothing less. Kiba said, as he walked away. As he was exiting the locker room and leaving the gym, Izuku was approached by Murayama and Kate. Hey, you seem to be very embarrassed. Murayama said, smirking. I'm sorry about being naked in front of the whole school. Izuku mumbled, as Kate merely rubbed his head. And that was when they noticed him flinch, before Kate even placed her hand on his head. But after it was on his head and was rubbing, he leaned into the touch. And when they saw that, Kate removed her hand from his head softly, as Izuku moved back from them a little embarrassed as he looked away. Are you okay, Midoriya? Murayama asked, concerned. What do you mean? Izuku asked, confused. You flinched when Kate moved her hand above your head. Is your home life safe? Murayama asked, concerned. Well, I was bullied a lot in my middle school in Mizudafu, Japan, and I wouldn't be capable of having friends since I was a toddler. Izuku mumbles as he gets ready to bolt. Well, make sure that you get some kind of therapy. Kate said, worried. As Izuku left the Kendo club room, he made his way back to the school to prepare for the last bit of school. When he was about to enter the new school building, he was approached by a small girl with white hair. You're Midoriya, right? The girl asked. Yes. Izuku asked. Well, Bucho wishes to speak with you. The girl said, as Izuku followed the girl to the old school building. As he entered the building, he found himself getting intimidated at the fact that he was surrounded by simple haunted aesthetic as he was being slowly creeped out. Well, we're here. Just sit on the couch and talk with Bucho. The girl said as she walked away. Izuku knocked on the door, and once he received to come in, he entered the room and was immediately hit with the sound of a shower being heard. As Izuku sat at the couch, he was immediately approached by a woman who had black hair and violet-colored eyes. Hello there, how are you today? She asked, placing some tea down. Fine, just wondering why I was needed. Izuku said, looking away. It was here that the leader of the club had entered the room, and she had been wearing a soaking, wet uniform that showed her bountiful rack that bounced with each and every movement. Izuku watched the girl enter the room, and when he noticed the movement of the girl's chest, he looked away out of the one of not being labeled a pervert. Welcome to our club room. I was hoping that you'd join us after this conversation. The woman said, as Izuku stared at her for a moment, before shaking his head. I can't join your club room, since I already am a part of another one. Izuku said, looking away. Well, that sucks. But that doesn't mean that I can't get you to join. The redhead said, smirking at him seductively. I'm sorry, but am I here to be seduced or not? Because if I am just going to leave. Izuku said, sighing. Sorry, just teasing you. Well, what do you know about the supernatural? The girl asked, as Izuku stared at her. Well, I know enough to know about the fact that both of you are a part of it. You are of the Gremory clan of devils, and I'm not sure about her. Izuku said, looking at the black-haired woman. Well, my name is Akino, and I am a part of the devil faction as well. I am Ria's servant as her queen. Akino said, smiling. Well, I guess that I can leave now. I wouldn't wish to keep you both distracted with how your third years. Izuku said, getting up and leaving the room. You sensed it, Akino? Rias asked, curious. Yes, I felt the presence of a dragon. Not only that, but it was very similar to Draig, the Welsh dragon of domination. Akino said, smirking. Well, we need to get him on our side, as well as get him to help me with my problem. Rias said, as she stared out the window to Izuku running to the new school building. Izuku was in school once again. It was a great time there as well. Everyone had lowered their thoughts about him being a really bad pervert on the likes of the perverted duo. But overall, he was training with the Kendo girls and getting his swordsmanship better than ever before. He also was told by Draig earlier that morning to increase his range of weapons, and he asked them if they had some bows and arrows that he can utilize his training on. When asked why he wanted to learn how to use a bow and arrow, he stated that it was just to increase his versatility. When they showed him where the materials were done, he had made sure to learn from the directions as well as he learned as fast as possible. He really wanted to get as strong as possible in order to unlock his balance breaker from Drake's power in order to really start getting stronger. So during the few weeks that had passed, he had trained harder than usual. That was getting the Kendo girls a little worried about how much training he was doing in order to get stronger. It all culminated in the fact that one day he was barely on his feet when he was stumbling into the clubroom, and the girls were extremely worried about him. With him stumbling around, they thought that he was extremely tired, but that wasn't what was causing their unrest. He had bags under his eyes, but his entire body was trembling as if he stayed up the entire week, just training without stopping. "Midoriya, are you all right?" Kate asked, worried. Looking at her lazily, he nodded his head before going over to the Kendo locker rooms as he changed into his Kendo clothes. Standing in the arena, he stood across from one of the other women in the club as they launched themselves at him. His dodging was swift as well as predicted, with flawless power used without wasting stamina. He slapped the sword on the girl's back softly as she moved back as he stood in a stance of one of his more powerful strikes. It was the Blazing Universe move. Moving faster than the girl could even register, he appeared behind her, swiping the wooden blade down her back as she collapsed to the ground unconscious. Izuku didn't understand what was happening. He was extremely tired, but his movements were already on par with that of when he was fully awake. But to him, what was that yelling? Why were people surrounding him like he was hurt? As he looked around himself, he found the area around him in flames as he looked down at his chest. It had a small indentation inside it as he coughed up for the first time since joining the club. "Oh, so that was why I heard someone screaming." Izuku mumbled as he fell back onto the ground unconscious. "Hurry, get him to the nurse's office," Murayama called out, worried. She had heard him mumble that as he fell back as they looked at Koneko as she was looking at him in worry. She hadn't meant to hit him that hard, since it seemed like his mind was elsewhere, and when he then started to wheeze from her hit, she knew it hit him when she then saw vital fluid as she started to look at the Kendo girls. They all screamed at how his chest seemed to cave in, and they immediately tried to push him to the ground. But when he mumbled some words, the girls got even more scared for him. So here we are, inside the nurse's office as the said nurse was healing him with the best she could as he slept on the bed. "All right, tell me what happened to him," she asked as Murayama told her what happened. "You all are aware that he is quirkless, right? He can't take too much damage from hits like Koneko-chan's strength augmentation quirk. The moment he was hit in the chest, it caused his heart to stop momentarily. I'm surprised he stayed alive from that," the nurse said, surprised by his vitality. The day would continue on as Koneko would sit next to Izuku's sleeping body as she silently prayed to Satan for his safe recovery. But just as she was about to leave the nurse's office, she overheard him mumbling something in his sleep. "Kaken, please stop. I didn't mean to do it," Izuku mumbled as he started to sweat. "He's having a nightmare?" she asked softly. Walking over to him, she placed her hand on his forehead as she noticed how he was burning up from his forehead. Placing a new cold wet rag over his head, she rubbed his hair as she noticed he leaned into the touch as if he was touch-starved. "Even in sleep, he is more adorable," Koneko said, smiling. A whole week passed from that moment, as Izuku found out that Koneko accidentally hit him a bit too hard as he trained his body to take more and more hits. It was honestly surprising with how many times he came to school with bruises on him from the Kendo club, as he was planning on getting a rematch against the little girl. And he would get his rematch as they stood across from one another in the field behind the ORC, as he stood with his fists alone. So this match is to see who is stronger, the Red Dragon Emperor or Koneko my rook, Ria said as she stood off to the side. As soon as Akino shot some lightning into the air, both combatants launched at one another with a fist raised for the other. Koneko punched him in his solar plexus as he punched her in the gut. While he lost some air, she spit out some spittle, and he kicked her away as he went on the offensive in order to defeat her. While she was on defense, she had high amounts of stamina as well as defense, and Izuku realized that he would waste his strength on her defense without thinking right. Jumping back, he went on the defensive as she attacked him with unparalleled strength that he thought that this was the perfect way to train his strength in order to get stronger. It soon devolved into them both punching each other in the face and seeing who will run out of stamina first. Both had landed powerful punches on the other as they skidded apart as the other appeared near them to attack, once more bringing them into a clash. When they clash, the ground broke underneath them as they fought for supremacy or for Izuku domination. Soon enough, Izuku overpowered the smaller girl with his sheer size, as well as speed, as he punched her away only to appear behind her and kick her to the sky, and as he jumped into the air, she pulled out her wings as she flew around him. Pulling himself into a ball, Koneko attacked from all angles as she punched and kicked at his impeccable defense that was made on the fly. Soon enough, she got tired of him defending as she just kicked him to the ground as she landed near him. There was a small dust cloud as she cracked her knuckles looking into the dust to see where Izuku was. Little did she know, he was already behind her and rearing back a leg to kick her in the back. Noticing a shadow behind her, she turned around only to meet the leg of Izuku, smashing into her guard that she placed as fast as possible, sending her skidding through the earth a few meters. It was here that she realized her mistake, as she moved her guard as she looked up where she sensed him, and all she saw was red lightning surrounding him as he had a battle-manic face that was smiling at her as the sun turned his body into a large shadow. He punched her in the face, sending her to the dirt as she skidded across the ground and landed in front of Rias. Looking up from her feet, Rias paused the timer as she told Izuku to take a break. "That's enough. You defeated Koneko." "You did great, Koneko-chan," Rias said, as the girl nodded her head before getting up from the ground. "You have the strength of a knight as well as rook. What's next? You have the power of a queen," she asked irritably. "Maybe?" Izuku asked, as she looked at him exasperated. "I didn't mean it literally," Rias said, pouting. Izuku shook his head as he looked at the approaching Koneko. "Good fight, Koneko-chan," Izuku said, as she smirked at him and fist bumped him. "We'll have a good weekend, Izuku. We will test your power tomorrow, though, with Akino as the person to show you," Rias said, as Izuku nodded his head. He was really getting used to these girls, and he was happy that they weren't causing his poor heart some attacks. Arriving home, Izuku was met with his mother screaming on the phone as someone had been trying to get her to come back to the city in order to arrest her. Sighing in sadness, he walked to his room as he took off his clothes in order to cool off under the air conditioner that was on his window. He smiled as he looked out the window at the sunset off in the distance. This place was the perfect spot for him to hide so that he couldn't get arrested by any heroes. He loved it since he was making new friends. He didn't wish to be a hero anymore, as that dream was destroyed when Katsuki had taken his friendship too far with him to even care about him anymore, and hours later being declined the chance to become a hero by All Might himself. He really needed to think of another job to have when he moved out of his home, because he couldn't think about leaving his mother all alone at the moment. So heading to sleep, he thought about what he should dream about now in terms of a dream job. Little did he know that he was being watched by someone from a great distance away from his location. So he is this generation's Red Dragon Emperor. This will be interesting, the unknown said, smiling happily. And I am doing multiple chapters for y'all today. I hope you don't hate me for doing these chapters specifically tailored to each individual inside Rias Peerage, as this will pose a problem for my storytelling. Akino will be the last one that Rias sends out to fight Izuku, and with him being attacked by her, will make him really question his reality. Now let's begin this chapter. It will be a small one, though. Izuku was at his home training with Drake when he asked the dragon a question that was on his mind. "Hey Drake, can I ask you 2 questions? Izuku asked. "Well, you asked one, so ask the other." Drake grumbled. "Well, what would happen if I sacrificed one of my limbs to you?" Izuku asked curiously. "That is a bad question, partner. You don't want me to do that, since that will have me take one of your human limbs and replace them with a dragon's. After that, your body will have to adjust to the new amount of vital fluid going through that body part and slowly integrate it into the rest of your body. Also, don't ask to replace your brain as well as heart, as it will literally kill you," Drake said, as Izuku gulped audibly. "All right, only doing that in a last-ditch effort in order to gain power fast enough to defeat an opponent," Izuku said, with Drake scoffing. "At least you're smarter than my previous host." He asked me to replace his entire body with that of a dragon's because he thought it would be cool. It killed him in the process before he could even fight his foe, Drake said, even further making Izuku think to use it as a last resort. Who was the foe? Izuku asked curiously. It was the white one. He never fought him since he died before getting the chance to meet him. Please, for the love of God, don't kill yourself before meeting my eternal rival. I would at least like to last long enough to get a chance to fight him once. Drake said, complaining. Sorry about that, buddy. Well, I will at least be your friend at least. Izuku said, smiling at his arm. Don't get ahead of yourself, kid. I am merely a tool that you can use to your own ends. I only have the choice of giving you my power to support your dreams. Drake said, before going to sleep. Well, there goes my talk with Drake for the day. I was really hoping to become his friend. I will become it one day. At least I hope I do. Izuku mumbled. Izuku walked through the front gates of the school, only to find that he couldn't even see any students. Odd. There should have been students coming by at this point in the morning. Is there a barrier in the sky? Izuku asked and deduced as he looked to the sky. But what he saw in the sky was something he simply wished he didn't look up to see. He looked up to see Kendo standing in the sky with her wings out and charging some electricity. Holy cow! Both Izuku and Drake called out as the blast hit them dead on. As the blast created a smoke cloud, Izuku could barely hear the snickering of Kendo as she floated down to see what happened through the smoke. Landing near him, she found that there was a cartoonish imprint on the ground with Izuku's image on it as she started to laugh. I didn't believe that this would happen. Kendo laughed. Right behind you, Izuku yelled, gaining her attention as he landed a punch on her back, sending her into the distance of the school grounds. I never knew that you escaped that crater. How did you do it? Kendo asked, a little curious. A dragon emperor never reveals his secrets, Izuku said before Drake came in. He literally dodged out of the way, the dragon said, making Izuku lower his head in embarrassment. That's precious. Betrayed by your own dragon's soul. I hope that you will be on better terms later, Kendo said, charging up some more electricity. Drake, I blame this on you. Izuku screamed as he ran off. Don't blame me. I am forced to be here against my will. Drake called out. Haven't you ever heard of the bro code? Izuku screamed as he dodged some lightning. What is this code? Drake yelled. I can't tell you right now. I am in the middle of a fight. Izuku yelled back as Kendo appeared behind him with a scary smile. I need an adult. Izuku mumbled as he stared at her in fear. But his face was also red from how close her chest was to his face. Don't worry, the pain will be but momentary. Pain will follow, Kendo said as she blasted Izuku with him screaming in pain. Gah. Kendo, can you please tell me why Izuku is here and covered in bandages? Sona asked angrily. I attacked him to see if his situational awareness is good enough, but you can see what happened. She said happily, keep this woman away from me. She attacked me while I was on my way to school. Izuku screamed as he hid behind Tsubasa. The entire room chuckled at his fear of Kendo, as said woman chuckled at his fear as well. Well, someone needs to make sure that you're on your toes every day. Kendo said, I have Drake for that. I don't need my fear of women getting stronger. Izuku said, moving closer and closer to the door. You are aware that you're hiding behind a woman, right? Sona asked, with a smirk on her face. Izuku asked, looking up at Tsubasa's eyes before becoming red in the face. Sorry? Izuku squeaked as he left the student council room. Kendo, can you please tell me why you would attack Izuku knowing his fear of women? Sona asked. Rias had sent me out to see how well he could fight, and he did well against me to last as long as he did. Were it anyone else, they would have died. He has some serious pain tolerance if I had to say anything. Kendo said, smiling. Well, it can be chalked up to his previous life as a quirkless individual in Mizudafu, Sona said, causing the Nadeshiko woman to look at her curiously. What happened to him to make him move here? Kendo asked. He was framed for something that he never did, and is now being searched for all over the world. Sona said angrily. Well, what did he exactly do? Kendo asked. He merely existed in the presence of his old friend, Katsuki Bakugo. Sona said, placing a file down. Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk explosion. It says here that he wishes to be a hero, but it says nothing about bullying nor attacking other students. Akino said, looking concerned. This boy is the reason why Izuku is afraid of every single person he comes across. He bullied him physically to the point that explosions as well as lightning strikes don't work that well on his body as it acclimated enough to handle the power of the attack. Then there's the fact that the very same boy as well as his peers had mentally abused him to the point that he doesn't even value his own life. Not to mention that Izuku's idol All Might told him that a quirkless hero will never be something that could happen because of the fact that quirks are so powerful it would be literally impossible to defeat a quirked user without one. Sona said, I'm beginning to think that there is a but in there. Akino said, but from what I saw from his notebooks about heroes and villains, he very well could have become a quirkless hero who works as a quirk counselor at Yui in the daytime, while being a quirkless underground hero at night. Give him the mind of Nizu as well as the physical prowess of Aizawa Shota, otherwise known as Eraserhead, and Izuku would have become one of the most unstoppable quirkless heroes of all time. Sona said, revealing Izuku's hero analysis notebook. Akino picked it up and read it as she noticed that all these notes were completely accurate of certain heroes as well as other classmates in their classes of this school. And you said that he could have been the first ever quirkless hero with these notes? Akino said, looking worried. Yes, I know about what you're thinking about as well. He could have become, as Sona said, before Akino finished. Villain. If he broke his mind before coming here, he could have used this place as his base of operations, and we wouldn't have been none the wiser to his plans of revenge. Akino said, which made her silently glad that their generation's Red Dragon Emperor wasn't a villain through and through, and a pure boy who just wanted to be acknowledged for the skills he has and to attain his unattainable dream of being a quirkless hero. But now that his image has been tarnished, he can't become what he so wished to become for his entire life. Rias really will want him after hearing about all of this. It seems like he's still hurting for what this Katsuki Bakugo did to him. Akino thought to herself. Izuku was on his way home when he noticed a presence following him home. So stopping near the corner of an alleyway, he hid so he could find out who was following him. As soon as the person appeared around the corner, Izuku clotheslined them as he saw that it was just Koneko tailing him. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, Koneko-chan, Izuku said as Koneko was helped from the ground. Don't worry about that. How did you know I was following you? She asked, as Izuku walked with her to his home. I felt a presence following behind me as I ran and hid back here. Izuku said, as Koneko nodded her head. Well, that was a good idea, since I would have had to continue following you on foot. But make sure to keep an eye on the sky in case a fallen angel decided to get the jump on you. Koneko said, as they arrived at Izuku's home. Do you want to come inside, Koneko-chan? Izuku asked, as the girl stared at him for a moment before nodding her head. Sure, she said monotonously. So, this was the end of part 1 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.